and basically said I would commit my life to you and die for you.
Being mindful of like bringing these moments to God and like actively like praying.
Now we living together and it's all this stuff popping up that is like, oh, this is when the classic, she changed. All right, what's up, everybody? My name is Robert Bolden.
Hello. I am Kori Bolden.
My beautiful wife, and welcome back to another episode of Bolden Matrimony. Today we have a good conversation I'm excited for, but before we dig into that, how are you?
I am good. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. We just came back from a couple places. I had to go on a work trip that my wife came with me on this time, and we actually missed our flight. So she has a little bit of PTFD.
Do I or you?
I think you do. I don't be getting worked up over stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm the guy that is the last one to get on the plane.
Okay, yeah, no, that's Rob.
Kori is the first one to get in line when her boarding zone goes.
Yeah, I don't. So I will leave him and get on the plane, and yeah, he can do what he does. But anyway, we also went to Austin over this past weekend. My cousin, she and her husband, they had already gotten married and had a ceremony in October. Shout out Autumn and Ryan, but they had a reception with more friends and family, a bigger celebration. So we were there over the weekend, and it also happened to be my birthday weekend. So it was cool that we got to just explore, eat some great food, and just have a good time. Neither one of us had ever been to Austin before. So
Yeah,
beautiful city.
Beautiful city and great food.
Yeah.
Food was amazing.
Food.
I enjoyed breakfast. They do breakfast very well.
Yeah.
Another Broken Egg is the name of the restaurant that I will advocate for.
And then FD's Grill House.
FD's Grill House.
Good dinner there.
Really good dinner.
Yeah. So we had a great time.
Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
So what we're digging into today is I think a topic that culture has really kind of flipped on its head. I remember when I was young, it was sort of a thing that people didn't condone. And now it's kind of like the thing that everybody does.
They used to call it what they used to call
shagging up.
Shagging up. Yeah, shagging up.
So, yeah, by shagging up, we just mean living together. So, for people who decide to pretty much intertwine their lives before making that covenant, we're just going to share why we chose not to do that. And why we chose to go that route rather than the alternative. So, where do we start with that? I think just overall, like general thoughts on why you even, because it really wasn't even a conversation for us.
Yeah.
So, like, why wasn't a conversation amongst a generation that is more prone to do something like this? Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I think just more from a practical standpoint, when we first started dating, I think we started dating in 2018, and then the next year I bought my condo. So we, at that point I was just, and I had been living with my parents before that, and before that I went away to school and then came back. But I just wanted to have my own space. Like, I valued, really having my own space and time to really kind of get to know myself. Just really have my own space. And I appreciated that. I think for me, I've always, in addition to growing up and hearing, don't shack up and all of that, I think that kind of always stuck with me, and that was something that I just felt like I wanted to experience living with like my partner as my husband. Like, that was just something that I always looked at as being reserved for marriage. And so yeah, when we came together, it really wasn't a conversation that we ever had. It was just kind of like we both were like, I think I remember us vaguely like talking about it, but more from a hypothetical standpoint, not like actually considering living together. But we both had the same stance on it, so it was really never a conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I can attest to that too. That was something that in my household that I grew up in, like people just didn't really. If someone did it, it was always responded to by like kind of a stench.
But you know what? It's interesting though, because at one point early on when we started dating, you didn't have to be married. So, like, did you ever think about at some point if you, because you were like, at one point you were like, you know, I could just have a couple kids and whatever. So, do you think at a certain point you would have been cool with like,
You know what? You just called out something that I didn't even realize.
yeah, I just realized that now.
Because it just kind of flips my whole morality on its head. Because here I am saying I don't have to be married, but also feeling like I shouldn't live with whoever it is that I'm
But
with.
that's where you were back then.
That's where I was.
You weren't really thinking.
That's what happened when you ain't got Jesus. So stay with Jesus.
It's very contradictory.
It'll give you
but
all your morality. I'll say that much. But interestingly enough, I always saw it met with that type of response, like, you know, that's just something that you don't do, and if you do it, then it's people aren't happy for it, I guess. So it just always had kind of a negative connotation in my mind, which kept me from even entertaining it. I guess that's more so from just thinking about what other people would think. I never even thought further than that. So so it was interesting. Obviously, there are some pros to it, and there are some cons to it. It's pros and cons to everything. But I think with this in particular, the pros can be very short-sighted. They can be beneficial for a time, but long term, thinking about what you want ultimately, I don't think it's the way to get there. So what do you think some of those pros and cons are? Because there are some tangible things, like you will save money, you will be able to stack away a little bit more by cutting your expenses and things like that. What are some pros that you see to doing it, and then we'll talk about the flip side of that.
I think you've already covered
That's
it.
the only one.
Like saving money. And I've heard, you know, this is not a pro that I subscribe to, but, you know, I've heard it's a way to get to know your partner before you settle in and actually like lock all the way in and get married. That's a big one I've heard. But yes, the first thing that came to mind was like consolidating expenses. And I'm not gonna lie, there were some points where, you know, when we were getting closer to getting married, I was just like, okay, we got two separate houses. Like, this is dumb. But but it was so worth it. Like, it was worth it because, you know, when we did wind up coming together and, you know, consolidating and moving together and merging our finances and all of those things, which we talk about in actually another video that we can link. But yeah, when we did wind up bringing all those things together, it was, you know, I appreciated that experience. I appreciated it because it was like, okay, this is something new that we're like, it felt like we were actually becoming one, you know, so.
Yeah, it doesn't dismiss any element of what the full experience should be. So I can appreciate it from that aspect as well. Yeah, it's always interesting kind of looking at that because the pros, we talk about the money, we can save there. We're digging for extra pros here because obviously there aren't that many. But the other ones that I hear, you know, you can, like you mentioned, you can get to know your spouse a little bit. But with that also, like, comes temptation. If you really are in Christ and wanting to walk this thing out with him and live a life like him, you should refrain, or is it refrain or restrain?
Yeah,
Refrain from kind of putting yourself in situations that could cause you to
It's kind of
stumble.
like a gateway
Yeah,
to, that
yeah.
situation.
And some people would try to justify it and say, "Oh, we go sleep in separate beds, or we go do this." That's cute. That's
Yeah.
real cute, but like even still, and if you can do that, amen to you. But I still don't think it's something that should be condoned or pursued. Because for
Or
me, I
encouraged. It's not something,
or
yeah, we
encouraged.
would, yeah.
But I see it kind of as like this is your investment. I've invested in this relationship, and I want to see it return the best possible payout as it can. So for me, my thinking of it is like whatever I can eliminate from being a impasse or a peril in destroying this thing, I'm gonna just cut it out. Like
Yeah.
that scripture is say if your left hand calls you to sin or your left eye calls you to sin, cut it out. Like
Yeah.
we're not being literal, don't cut out your eye, but cut the situation off.
Yeah.
Cut off whatever the thing is that's causing a stumbling
That may
block
put you in a
in your life.
situation.
Yeah.
I and I think we're talking to a specific like group of people, because there are some people who never intend on getting married, who like live together, and that's, everyone has their prerogative and how they choose to live their life. Specifically for us, because at a certain point we like, marriage was something that we were working towards in our relationship. It was something that I always valued. It was something that I always wanted. Rob, he he
That
had
was a little indifferent.
he needed to come to Jesus and figure it out what
Try
he wanted.
Jesus, yo. I'm telling you, he'll change your life.
But ultimately, like, I know that there are people who really do want to get married, who, I've seen situations where friends or people that I know have lived with their partner, and, things didn't work out, and they wound up having to kind of uproot their life to like get out of that situation, which, is unfortunate. But yeah, it's just kind of some things that really don't have to happen.
Yeah.
Things that are like kind of getting into like the way your way of living and all of that. It's really kind of unnecessary. Whereas people who didn't live together and things didn't work out, it's just like kind of a clean break.
Right.
And
yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think that's not something to brush over, because like it's an opportunity cost. Like everything has a cost to it, whether you decide to move in or not. Like, so looking at it from that aspect, for me, it's like if we decide to do it the right way, like, and not move in together, live separately, do it as best we can. Even though that's tough, and even though I give up some very transactional things right away, the opportunity cost for me is greater on the other end of that, because like that's not a guarantee or a stamp of approval that my marriage is gonna be 100% solid. However, I feel like I put myself in the best situation possible for it to happen that way. Alternatively, like if you look at it from the aspect of the opportunity cost to move in right away, you do get some short-term exchanges from that opportunity. However, what you give up on the other end of that, it doesn't guarantee that you'll end up in divorce or separated or wherever. However, the odds say that that's a perfect segue.
That's a perfect segue, because there's actually like stats on this. So there's a report from Deseret.com, Deseret News. And it was a report that was done like a couple years ago, published by the Institute for Family Studies. And it says it found that marriage dissolution was higher. This report was done in 2022. And it found that marriage dissolution was higher for those who lived together before tying the knot. It says that 34% of the report found that 34% of the time, married couples who had lived together before they were engaged or married ended up divorced within the time frame studied.
34%.
34%, and that's in contrast to less than 1/4 of the marriages of those who were engaged or married before they decided to move in together. So basically, it's just like people who live together. The study found that people who lived together are more likely than people who didn't live together before they got married to to wind up getting divorced. And there was another thing that I found, another thing that it called out. It says, over time, but instead of becoming a practice that made couples less likely to split, and they're referring to living together, over time, couples became increasingly likely to break up rather than marry, increasing the disconnection between cohabitation and marriage. So also couples who live together, the study found that they're more likely to break up rather than get married. So there are a lot of couples who may be living together and still want to get married, and they wound up breaking up. But the crazy thing is a lot of times people say, okay, this is a way to test, how it would be living together in a marriage. First of all, I think like my personal belief is like marriage is so much more than living together.
Yeah.
Like
that is not the barometer of
yeah, it was never a barometer for me, because it was like there are things that I can discern in your character that I can see that, okay, this is how he makes decisions. This is how, and we saw a lot of that in our wedding planning process as well. I mean, we were together for like
that's
5
a
years.
huge part, but you can also pay attention to how that person lives in their own
space.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I've heard a lot of that. But then also, I've also seen situations where living together slows down that process of getting married, and then that's kind of the reason why people wind up breaking up, because they're
interesting.
Not.
Because most times people believe that that's gonna be something that expedites the process, something that will actually move me closer towards the touchdown, like the celebratory moment. And what this survey and what we've seen is that it actually does the total opposite.
Yeah. What the old folk used to say, why buy the cow when you could have why buy the milk when you could have the cow for free or whatever. But either way, that's just kind of like tying into what this is kind of saying in the report, and what I've seen, in just different situations with, people that I've known or, heard different things. So yeah, but tying it back to us, for me, it was more so about seeing, like you said, we lived in our own spaces, and yes, like we had each other's, so we would be lying if we said we never like spent the night over each other's houses and stuff like that. But
we did that, and that's still something that we had to learn from today.
Yeah,
like tremendously.
But even at a certain point, we were like, in our relationship, we were like, okay, we have to put boundaries around this, because even though we don't live together, it's still, we still need to put boundaries around this. So, but all that to say, there were things that we were able to learn about one another, even with not having lived together, that I was able to see, your character, how you move, how you make decisions, how you communicate, like all of those things helped me to get an understanding of how you would operate in a marriage. And I mean, I see that every day now. So.
It says, he who is faithful with little will be faithful with much. So
how you do anything is
how you do anything is how you do everything. Yeah. So with the very things that you have today, every good and perfect gift comes from above. So it says like who if you've been entrusted something, you're called to be a steward of that thing. So no matter how big, no matter how small, whatever it is, just make sure that you're taking care of it, and you'll be entrusted with more at some point.
Yeah.
So that's the case for today. I did want to just point out too, going back to people who make that decision. It's kind of you move the goalpost so much in those situations where the standard, if the standard for our household it became marriage, but for others we don't know. But if the goal is marriage, then if that standard and that goalpost is moved all the time, meaning you compromise in a small thing, meaning y'all move in together, you compromise in another thing, y'all combining y'all finance. It's a snowball that keeps getting
Yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger. And then once you realize, like, this my last chance to get out of here, it's so easy to wipe your hands clean of that and move forward rather than like sticking it out. So it's a covenantal thing
Yeah.
that's missing from this that never allows you to really make a decision to commit.
It's really, in my opinion, is, and when you kind of go into it with that mindset, it's not really preparing you for marriage. That mindset kind of prepares you for divorce. Because it's kind of like, all
It's
right,
counterintuitive.
I'm gonna do this, but then when S hits the fan, then
I'm outta here.
I'm out of here, because. But yeah, I mean, I
So
think
it doesn't prepare you for marriage. It actually prepares you for
that's my
cohabitation.
belief. That's my perspective, and whoever does, if you do, anyone who's watching this or listening, y'all live together. I would love to hear your perspective and experiences with it, and how that's been working for y'all. But for us, that was something that we had a conviction about, and we just chose to hold off on that until we got married.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about principles. Like, if you follow a principle, it's not guaranteed to work all the time. However, it does put you in a situation where you can bet your bottom dollar that you did everything good, you did everything right, and it should work out well just based on the numbers as well as what we have seen and experienced. So,
And I want to make this a little more interesting. I want specifically people who identify as Christian who live together or who have lived together. Like, I want to know, like, what your rationale is and what your experience and belief is behind that. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting dialogue.
yeah. Yeah.
So
So that's it for this episode. Appreciate you guys as always tapping in. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and be on the lookout for future videos that we shall be producing.
yeah,
So,
and let us know some other topics y'all would want to, talk about, hear, listen, have us share, all of that good stuff. So
cool.
love y'all.
Enjoy your night.
Bye.
Deuces.